In the last video, we talked a little bit about how our soul experiences life. Now, this video is going to build a lot on that, so if you haven't already watched it, I would suggest going back and running through that video before watching this one. There's a link in the description below. So, basically in the last video, we talked about how our soul experiences life through sensory information, whether that be smell, touch, sight, and whatever. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how our soul's individual experience of life fits into the bigger picture of the universe's experience of life. So we're going to, instead of looking at a microscopic level, we're going to zoom out a little bit, and we're going to zoom out a lot actually, and we're going to be looking at the nature of the universe and how it experiences itself. So to begin, I want you to start by picturing a large bubble of energy. And this energy makes up all that exists, all energy, all matter, everything that creates the universe in which we live in. This energy encapsulates all that exists. I call this the universal consciousness. I call it we, you, I, us, or God. Now take this bubble of energy and divide it into clusters. Some of this energy builds the planets, stars, and galaxies. Some of this energy is used to create human beings, such as you and I. And the rest of this energy is used to create all other life forms, ranging from plants to animals to any other forms of life in any other universe. I personally believe that each and every one of us is made up of the energy that makes the universal consciousness up. I believe that the energy has the property of consciousness or awareness. So no matter how small you divide energy or matter, that cluster still has an experience of life. It may be drastically different from ours, but it exists. I believe that everything, meaning all matter, all plants, all animals, all humans, all life in general, has an experience of life. I think humans sometimes pride themselves on thinking that we are the only things that have any experience of life. But that feels a little limiting from my perspective, and I feel like it's a little bit more fun to entertain the fact that maybe all layers of existence experience some sort of reality and some sort of consciousness. So our experience of life is our own special sliver of the grand experience of the universe. And each and every one of you helps make up that mosaic. Every one of us has our own slice of the experience. But when we expand away from just human beings and we consider all of what exists, we end up with this beautiful spectrum of experiencing life, ranging from what the experience of a plant or an animal is, all the way up to us as human beings. There's even a higher level than us out there that is experiencing a completely different level of consciousness or reality. When it comes down to it, no matter if you're human or not, all matter and energy has some level of experience to life. And when we look at it from this perspective, we can begin to unravel the mysteries of the universe and maybe understand at a universe level what is going on. We're going to take a quick break for a second and recap kind of what we've gone over so far before we continue diving into this deeper. So at the very beginning, we talked about how the universal consciousness, or God, is all the energy and matter that exists. We also talked about how the universal consciousness is experiencing life at all layers of energy and matter, from plants to animals to human beings to even our planet. We are not the only species or beings on the planet or in the universe that experience a level of consciousness or awareness or experience some sort of reality. And I think that it's important going forward that we recognize that there are other levels out there that maybe have their own sliver of experience, that when grouped together with our experience of life and all the other experiences of life, create this beautiful mosaic that is the experience of all that is. This next section is going to rely heavily on the book Transcending Levels of Consciousness by David R. Hawkins, who has an MD and a PhD. David Hawkins is a widely known authority within the fields of consciousness research and spirituality. He has written and taught from the unique perspective of an experienced clinician, scientist, and mystic. According to his book, the levels of consciousness can be broken down and labeled from a range of 0 to 1,000. Experts on consciousness, including himself, have determined that the human race kind of sits around the 2 to 300 range on this scale of consciousness. That doesn't mean that some existing humans aren't outside this range, but just generally put, that's where most of us reside. So let's look at these levels of consciousness. And you'll notice that at the bottom of these levels there are some such as anger and shame and guilt. And these are lower levels of consciousness. And what this scale is kind of trying to convey is that as you raise your level of awareness or raise your consciousness, you start to kind of, your state of being becomes those higher levels, such as peace and joy and happiness and acceptance, instead of being angry or frustrated or prideful or all those lower levels of consciousness. Now, before you go ahead and start assigning yourself a certain level on this scale, I want you to stop for a second, because that's not what we're supposed to be using this scale for. In fact, you're not just going to have some function that spits out a number and boom, that's your assigned consciousness level. It doesn't really work that way. In fact, you and I actually, our consciousness level shifts from day to day, from moment to moment. You know, there's many of times that I experience very low levels of anger, if any anger at all. But that doesn't mean that I never experience levels of anger. And we kind of fluctuate in this range a little bit. So it's really important to notice that we don't align with a very specific value. We kind of fluctuate on this range. And this spectrum or this range or hierarchy that we're looking at here is trying to just demonstrate what it might look like to have levels of consciousness. Permanently moving up and down these levels of consciousness can require lifetimes of experiencing. And you know, some of you may not believe that we experience multiple lifetimes. I'm of the personal belief system that we got a lot more work to do here than just one lifetime's worth. So moving up this levels of consciousness, so to speak, requires a lot more soul work than one lifetime can contain. And if you look back on human history, you can see that some of these layers that we've been looking at here in this video correspond to major, sections of human history. You know, you look back in the Bible or other records of history and you can notice there's eras of extreme anger and frustration, of pride, of shame, of guilt, and you can see that a lot of these stories and a lot of the history that's been written already correlates to the human race trying to evolve through some of these levels of consciousness. And we're making movements. I know that there's a lot of pessimistic people out there who like to think that, oh, you know, we'll never, as a human race, move past anger and frustration and pride. And maybe that's true to a certain extent, but I'd like to believe that we're making some level of progress. And I think that the transformation of, you know, the digital age and our increased communication and just a lot of what's been happening in the last couple hundred of years for human beings is kind of tying into us moving up this consciousness kind of hierarchy. So in this video, we talked a lot about transcending levels of consciousness, and if this book kind of interests you more, I placed a link in the description. You can buy it on Amazon. I think it's like $10, something like that. It's pretty cheap. And it talks a lot more about this subject matter, and it talks more in depth on each layer of consciousness, and it helps us as a human to kind of figure out what layer we reside in most often and what we need to work through as far as our soul's work to kind of advance. And I want to pause here because I really hate adding this sense of success or levels that spiritual people kind of progress through, because it's a paradox really, in my opinion, because I don't really think that there's anything we really need or have to do in this lifetime. We kind of have the freedom to do whatever we want, but I think that it helps us kind of navigate that soul's experience and progression in life when we overlay these kind of hierarchies and levels of, in this case, consciousness. So I want to, reiterate, the point here isn't to say that our goal in this lifetime is to move from step 1 to step 2, and if we don't, we failed in this lifetime. It's not that at all. But this book kind of jumps really into the depths of what it would look like for a person who is experiencing the state of pride very frequently, and how we can kind of help that individual evolve and expand their levels of awareness and consciousness to where they don't reside in that level as frequently. So lastly, why does this apply to you? Well, we just talked about how you don't really need to do any of this, and then it's all just your choice to be a part of this and to have the drive to evolve your levels of consciousness. But this video primarily was oriented around us looking at a very, very big picture, the experience of the universe. And if we zoom all the way back out, everything experiences a certain level of consciousness. And when we group all of those things that are experiencing a level of consciousness, such as plants, animals, human beings, maybe other species that we're unaware of, when you group all these levels of experience together, we have what the experience of the universe is. Because whatever the universe is experiencing is basically what all of us experience. Because at the core, we are just a single drop in the ocean of the universal consciousness. But every drop matters, and it is incredibly important for us to realize that, no matter how big the universe is, we are important, we have purpose here. I love this quote by Alan Watts, and it really accurately sums up what we talked about in today's video. Through our eyes, the universe is perceiving itself. Through our ears, the universe is listening to its harmonies. We are the witnesses through which the universe becomes conscious of its glory, of its magnificence. That means that each and every one of you is extraordinarily important. Just like the human body has trillions and trillions of cells that make up its experience, the universe has trillions, an infinite really amount of beings that kind of group together make the experience of itself. Every single one of you is its own unique existence, its own unique subset of consciousness, its own unique perspective of us, of all of it. You have a perspective of life that only you have. And without that perspective, the universe would not be able to experience itself fully. I hope that this video adds a little purpose and drive to your life, and maybe adds a little pep to your step, because it's kind of cool sometimes to think about how equally meaningless life is, but also how extraordinarily important and meaningful life can be if we place the meaning onto it. Life by itself has no meaning. Only meaning that life has is the meaning that we give it. So if you like what we're talking about here, go ahead and subscribe down below. I'm going to be kind of continuing to do stuff like this in the near future, so if this kind of content interests you, stay tuned for more, because we're going to be talking about a lot of really interesting concepts, and yeah, I'm excited to kind of continue this forward. It's been a lot of fun so far. So you guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Take it easy, guys.